The morning sun streamed through the windows of Riverside Rehabilitation Center as Maya hurried down the familiar hallway. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, and she clutched her coffee cup tighter, already running late for her shift. After 3 years of working as a nurse at the center, she knew every corner of the building, every patient's routine, and every challenge that came with helping people rebuild their lives. Maya had always been drawn to helping others. Even as a child, she would bandage her dolls and pretend to be a doctor. But reality had hit hard when she graduated nursing school, with a mountain of student debt that seemed to grow bigger every month. The rehabilitation center didn't pay as much as the big hospitals, but Maya loved the work. She got to see people make real progress, watch them fight back from injuries and illnesses that had turned their worlds upside down. That Tuesday started like any other day. Maya checked her patient list and noticed a new name at the bottom. David Kim, 29 years old, admitted for physical therapy following a car accident. The notes mentioned partial paralysis and the need for long-term rehabilitation. Maya had seen hundreds of similar cases, but something about each new patient always made her curious about their story. She knocked gently on the door of room 214 before entering. The man sitting by the window in a sleek black wheelchair looked nothing like what she had expected. Most patients who came to the center looked tired, defeated, or angry about their circumstances. David was different. He sat straight, his dark hair perfectly styled, wearing what looked like an expensive button-down shirt. When he turned to look at her, his smile was genuine and warm. "You must be Maya," he said, his voice confident and smooth. "I've heard wonderful things about you from the other staff." Maya felt herself blush slightly. "Thank you. I'm here to go over your therapy schedule and see how you're settling in." Over the next hour, Maya learned that David had been in a car accident 6 months earlier. He spoke about it calmly, without the bitterness or sadness she usually heard from new patients. He explained that he owned a technology company and had been driving home from a late business meeting when another driver ran a red light. The impact had damaged his spinal cord, leaving him unable to walk. What struck Maya most was David's attitude. Instead of focusing on what he had lost, he talked about adapting and moving forward. He asked thoughtful questions about his therapy and seemed genuinely interested in her work. When she mentioned that she had studied rehabilitation techniques in college, he wanted to know more about her education and career goals. "Most people don't realize how much skill goes into what you do," David said as Maya checked his chart. "You're not just helping with exercises. You're helping people find hope again." Maya had never heard a patient describe her work that way. She found herself staying longer than necessary, enjoying their conversation. David was intelligent and funny, with stories about his business travels and insights about technology trends that fascinated her. When she finally left his room, she realized she was looking forward to seeing him again tomorrow. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Maya would arrive for her shift and always check on David first. His physical therapy sessions were going well, though his progress was slower than some patients. He never complained about the pain or the difficulty of the exercises. Instead, he would joke with the physical therapists and encourage other patients who were struggling. Maya began to notice small things about David that set him apart from her other patients. His clothes were always perfectly pressed and looked expensive. He wore a watch that probably cost more than Maya made in several months. Sometimes she would see him on phone calls that sounded like business meetings, speaking confidently about investments and company strategies. One afternoon, Maya was helping David with his arm exercises when he mentioned that he was having his car delivered to the rehabilitation center. "Your car?" Maya asked, surprised. "Most patients relied on family members or medical transport." "Well, it's specially modified now," David explained. "Hand controls, wheelchair accessibility. I figured it was time to start driving again." When Maya saw the car the next day, her eyes widened. It was a sleek black luxury sedan, the kind she had only seen in magazines. The modifications looked expensive and professional. David noticed her expression and smiled. "The company has been doing well," he said simply. "Even before the accident, I believed in investing in quality." Maya couldn't help but wonder what kind of technology company David owned. He was always vague about the details, mentioning client meetings and product development, but never specifics. When she asked, he would change the subject or joke that technology was boring compared to her stories about nursing school. As David's therapy progressed, Maya found herself looking forward to their conversations more and more. He would ask about her day, remember details about her life that she had mentioned weeks earlier, and always seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. Other nurses began to tease Maya about spending extra time with the handsome patient in room 214. One evening, as Maya was finishing her shift, David asked if she would like to have coffee with him in the center's cafeteria. They sat by the large windows overlooking the garden, talking about everything except his accident or her work. David told her about his love of photography and his dream of traveling to Japan. Maya shared her hopes of eventually getting a master's degree in nursing, and maybe working with children someday. "You should do it," David said seriously. "Don't let anything hold you back from your dreams." Maya laughed, but there was sadness in it. "Dreams cost money. I'm still paying off my student loans from nursing school. A master's degree feels impossible right now." David was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible when you least expect it. That night, Maya couldn't stop thinking about David's words and the way his touch had made her feel. She had dated other men, but none of them had ever made her feel so understood and valued. David saw her as more than just a nurse or someone struggling with debt. He saw her dreams and potential. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened into something more. David would bring Maya small gifts, always thoughtful and never too expensive to make her uncomfortable. A book by her favorite author, flowers from the hospital gift shop, or her preferred coffee from the cafeteria. He remembered everything she told him and celebrated small victories in her life like they were major achievements. The other staff members began to notice the connection between Maya and David. Some warned her about getting too close to patients. But David wasn't like other patients. He was kind, intelligent, and despite his circumstances, optimistic about the future. Maya had never met anyone who made her feel so special and understood. 3 months after David arrived at the rehabilitation center, Maya realized she was falling in love with him. It wasn't just his charm or his obvious wealth. It was the way he listened to her, supported her dreams, and made her believe that she deserved good things in life. For the first time in years, Maya felt hopeful about her future, and David was becoming a central part of that hope. 6 months had passed since David first arrived at the rehabilitation center, and Maya's world had completely changed. What started as professional care had blossomed into the most meaningful relationship of her life. David had been discharged from the center 2 months ago, but their connection had only grown stronger. Maya still remembered the day David left the rehabilitation center. She had felt a mix of pride in his progress and sadness about not seeing him every day. But David had surprised her by asking if she would like to continue their friendship outside the hospital walls. That evening, he had taken her to dinner at a restaurant that was far fancier than anywhere Maya had ever been. Now, they spent most of their free time together. David would pick her up after her shifts in his modified luxury car, and they would drive to beautiful places around the city. He showed her parts of town she had never seen, expensive neighborhoods with houses that looked like mansions. Sometimes they would park near the waterfront and talk for hours about their dreams and fears. Maya learned more about David during these quiet moments. He told her about growing up as an only child, how his parents had pushed him to succeed in business from a young age. He spoke about the pressure of running a company and making decisions that affected many employees. But whenever Maya asked specific questions about his business, David would become vague, saying that work was boring and he preferred to focus on her. The gifts became more frequent and more expensive. David brought Maya jewelry that sparkled under the lights, designer handbags that cost more than her monthly rent, and clothes that made her feel like a different person. At first, Maya felt uncomfortable accepting such expensive presents. "I can't take this," she had said when David presented her with a diamond bracelet for her birthday. "It's too much." "Nothing is too much for someone who means everything to me," David replied, his eyes sincere. "Besides, money isn't important if you can't share happiness with the people you care about." Maya's friends at work began to notice the changes. She wore nicer clothes, carried expensive accessories, and seemed to glow with happiness. During lunch breaks, she would show them photos on her phone of the places David had taken her. Fancy restaurants, art galleries, weekend trips to luxury hotels in nearby cities. "Where does all his money come from?" asked Lisa, one of the other nurses. "I mean, what kind of technology company does he own?" Maya realized she didn't have a clear answer. "He develops software applications," she said. repeating what David had told her. Business solutions for other companies. But what kind of applications? Lisa pressed. Who are his clients? Maya felt a small flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. She had asked David these same questions many times, but he always gave general answers. He would mention meetings with investors and clients, but never provided names or details. When she asked to visit his office, he explained that he mostly worked from home now because of his wheelchair accessibility needs. Despite these small doubts, Maya pushed her concerns aside. David was the most caring and attentive man she had ever known. He remembered every detail about her life, called her every morning to wish her a good day, and made her feel like the most important person in the world. When she mentioned wanting to take a weekend trip to see her parents, David immediately offered to drive her there and pay for a nice hotel. The visit to meet her family had been both wonderful and strange. David charmed her parents completely, bringing expensive wine and flowers for her mother. He spoke knowledgeably about her father's hobby of woodworking, and even offered to buy him professional-grade tools. But Maya noticed that when her parents asked about his family, David's answers were brief and seemed rehearsed. "My parents live overseas now," he had said. "We don't see each other very often because of business commitments and travel." "Do they know about Maya?" her mother had asked warmly. David had paused just a moment too long before answering. "They're very private people, but I'm sure they would love her as much as I do." That night, lying in the hotel bed next to David, Maya had felt a strange mix of happiness and confusion. Everything about their relationship felt perfect, but sometimes she felt like she was dating a character from a movie rather than a real person. David seemed too good to be true, too generous, too understanding. 3 weeks later, David surprised Maya with the biggest shock of her life. They were having dinner at their favorite restaurant when he suddenly reached into his jacket pocket. Maya's heart stopped as she saw him pull out a small velvet box. "Maya," David said, his voice trembling slightly. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, focused only on business and success. You showed me what really matters." Maya's hand shook as David opened the box to reveal the most beautiful engagement ring she had ever seen. The diamond was huge, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the restaurant's soft lighting and threw tiny rainbows across the table. "Will you marry me?" David asked, his eyes filled with tears. Through her own tears, Maya whispered yes. The entire restaurant erupted in applause as David slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. Maya couldn't stop staring at it, couldn't believe that something so beautiful was now hers. The next few weeks passed in a blur of excitement and planning. David insisted on handling most of the wedding arrangements, saying he wanted to take the stress off Maya so she could focus on her work. He hired a wedding planner, booked a beautiful venue, and arranged for flowers that cost more than Maya's car. But as the wedding planning progressed, Maya began to notice more things that didn't quite add up. When she suggested meeting David's business partners or longtime friends, he always had excuses. His business associates were traveling, or they were too busy with important projects. His childhood friends had moved away or lost touch over the years. "Don't you have anyone you want to invite?" Maya asked one evening as they reviewed the guest list. Her side had 30 people, including family, friends from work, and college roommates. David's side had only 5 names, all people he claimed were business contacts. "I prefer small, intimate gatherings," David explained. "Besides, the most important person will already be there. You." Maya's friend Lisa expressed concerns more directly during a girls' night out. "Something doesn't feel right about this whole situation," she said carefully. "I mean, he's wonderful and he obviously cares about you, but don't you think it's strange that you've never met his family or seen where he works?" "People have different relationships with their families," Maya defended. "And his business is mostly online now." "But Maya," Lisa continued gently, "you're about to marry this man, and you don't really know anything concrete about his life before he met you." Maya felt a flash of anger, but underneath it was fear. Lisa was voicing the same doubts that Maya had been trying to ignore for weeks. She loved David deeply, but she had to admit that their entire relationship felt like it existed in a bubble, separate from the rest of the world. That night, Maya lay awake next to David, listening to his steady breathing and staring at the engagement ring on her finger. In 3 weeks, she would become Mrs. Kim, starting a new life with a man who seemed to love her more than anything. But for the first time since David had proposed, Maya wondered if she really knew who she was marrying. 2 weeks before the wedding, Maya's anxiety was growing stronger every day. The beautiful venue was booked. The flowers were ordered, and her dress hung in the closet like a white cloud of dreams. But the closer the wedding day came, the more questions filled her mind about the man she was about to marry. Maya tried to focus on the positive things. David continued to be the most loving and supportive partner she could imagine. He would surprise her with breakfast in bed before her early shifts, leave sweet notes in her purse, and call her during his lunch breaks just to hear her voice. When she mentioned feeling stressed about the wedding costs, David assured her that money was no object and that she deserved the wedding of her dreams. But the small inconsistencies in David's stories were becoming harder to ignore. Last week, Maya had asked to see photos from his childhood, and David claimed that most of his pictures had been lost in a move several years ago. When she suggested they visit his apartment to pick up some of his belongings for their future home together, David explained that he was in the process of moving to a bigger place and everything was packed away in storage. The wedding planning itself had become another source of confusion. David insisted on handling all the payments directly, never showing Maya any bills or receipts. When she offered to contribute money from her savings account, David firmly refused, saying it was his responsibility as her future husband to provide for their special day. "I just want to help," Maya had said. "We're going to be partners in everything, right?" "Of course," David replied, kissing her forehead. "But right now, let me take care of this. You work so hard at the hospital, and planning a wedding is stressful enough without worrying about money." Maya's mother had called the night before, excited about the upcoming celebration, but also concerned about meeting David's family. "Will his parents be arriving soon?" she asked. "I'd love to have dinner with them before the wedding." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "They're still dealing with some travel complications," she said, repeating David's latest explanation. "David says they might not be able to make it after all." "They're going to miss their son's wedding?" her mother asked, clearly surprised. "That seems very unusual." After hanging up, Maya realized she couldn't remember David ever talking to his parents on the phone in front of her. He would sometimes step outside to take calls, saying they were business-related, but she had never heard him have a personal conversation with family members. The next day at work, Maya found herself distracted during her shift. She made small mistakes, forgot to update patient charts, and found it difficult to concentrate on conversations. During her lunch break, she sat in her car and called David's number, wanting to hear his voice and feel reassured. "Hey, beautiful," David answered warmly. "How's your day going?" "It's fine," Maya said, though she didn't feel fine at all. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Where are you right now?" There was a brief pause. "I'm at a client meeting downtown." "Why, what kind of meeting?" Another pause, longer this time. "Just some software development discussions." "Pretty boring stuff. Is everything okay? You sound worried." Maya wanted to push for more details, but something in David's tone made her hesitate. "I'm fine. I just miss you. I miss you too. Only 12 more days until you're my wife." That evening, Maya decided to do something she had never done before. She drove to the address David had given her as his home. She told herself she just wanted to surprise him with dinner, but deep down, she knew she was looking for answers to the questions that kept her awake at night. The address led her to a modest apartment complex, nothing like the luxury lifestyle David seemed to live. Maya sat in her car for 20 minutes watching the building, but she never saw David's distinctive black car in the parking lot. When she finally worked up the courage to knock on the apartment door, a young woman answered. "I'm looking for David Kim," Maya said, her heart pounding. "No one by that name lives here," the woman replied, looking confused. "I've been here for 8 months, and before me it was an elderly man named Frank." Maya mumbled an apology and rushed back to her car, her hands shaking as she started the engine. She drove home in a daze, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe she had written down the wrong address, or maybe David had already moved and forgotten to tell her the new one. When David called that evening, Maya didn't mention her trip to the apartment. Instead, she listened to him talk about his day, searching for any clues about where he had really been or what he was really doing. Everything sounded normal, but now Maya was hearing his words differently, noticing how vague he always was about specific details. The weekend before the wedding, Maya's friends threw her a bachelorette party. They went to dinner and then to a nice bar, celebrating Maya's upcoming marriage with champagne and laughter. But Maya found it hard to enjoy herself. Her mind kept wandering to all the unanswered questions about David. "You seem distracted tonight," her friend Lisa observed as they sat at the bar. "Aren't you excited about next weekend?" "Of course I am," Maya replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Lisa studied her friend's face carefully. "Maya, can I tell you something without you getting mad at me?" Maya nodded, though she felt nervous about what Lisa might say. "I tried to look up David's company online," Lisa said quietly. "I wanted to learn more about his business, maybe find some information to help with wedding small talk. But I couldn't find anything. No website, no business listings, no news articles about his company or any software they've developed." Maya felt like the room was spinning. "Maybe he keeps a low profile. Some businesses don't have a big online presence." "Maybe," Lisa said gently. "But Maya, in today's world, especially in technology, it's almost impossible to run a successful company without any digital footprint at all." That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought about everything she knew about David, trying to separate facts from assumptions. He had money, that was clear from his car and the expensive gifts. He was intelligent and well-educated. He genuinely seemed to care about her. But beyond those basic things, what did she really know about his life? 3 days before the wedding, Maya made a decision that terrified her. During her lunch break, she drove to the rehabilitation center where she and David had first met. She found David's old room and asked to speak with Dr. Peterson, the physician who had overseen his care. "I remember David well," Dr. Peterson said when Maya explained she was his fiancée. "He was one of our most motivated patients. How is his recovery progressing?" "He's doing well," Maya said carefully. "Dr. Peterson, can I ask about his medical records? I'm trying to understand more about his condition for insurance purposes." Dr. Peterson looked confused. "Insurance purposes?" "Maya, David's bills were paid in full before he was discharged. He didn't use any insurance. He paid cash. Everything was handled privately. Very unusual for such an extensive stay. But he insisted on handling all payments directly." Maya left the rehabilitation center with more questions than answers. Someone who paid tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills without using insurance was either very wealthy or very secretive about their identity. Either way, it was clear that David was not the simple businessman he claimed to be. 2 nights before her wedding, Maya sat in her apartment looking at her wedding dress and the engagement ring that sparkled on her finger. In 48 hours, she would walk down the aisle to marry a man she loved deeply but barely knew. The smart thing would be to postpone the wedding until she had answers. But Maya was afraid that asking the hard questions might mean losing David forever, and despite all her doubts, she couldn't imagine her life without him. The morning of her wedding day, Maya woke up with butterflies dancing wildly in her stomach. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, hitting her wedding dress where it hung on the closet door like a beautiful white promise. In 6 hours, she would be walking down the aisle to marry David. Despite all her doubts and unanswered questions, she had decided to trust her heart and move forward with the wedding. Maya's mother and sister arrived early to help her get ready. They filled the apartment with excited chatter, laying out makeup and hair accessories, discussing the timeline for the day. Maya tried to match their enthusiasm, but her mind kept wandering to all the mysteries surrounding David that remained unsolved. "You're glowing," her sister said as she helped Maya into her dress. "David is such a lucky man." Maya smiled, though her heart was racing. "I'm the lucky one," she replied, and part of her truly believed that. Whatever secrets David might be keeping, she knew he loved her deeply. That had to count for something. The wedding venue looked like something from a fairy tale. David had spared no expense on flowers, decorations, and elegant touches that transformed the garden space into a romantic paradise. White roses and baby's breath covered every surface, and soft music played as guests began to arrive. Maya peeked through the bridal suite window and watched people taking their seats. She recognized her family and friends on one side, but David's side of the venue looked sparse. Only 5 people sat in the rows designated for his guests, all of them well-dressed strangers she had never met before. "Those must be David's business associates," her mother said, looking out the window beside Maya. "He mentioned they were flying in just for today." Maya nodded, but something felt off about the whole situation. The people on David's side didn't talk to each other or seem familiar with one another. They sat quietly, almost formally, like actors waiting for their cue. 30 minutes before the ceremony, Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Can't wait to see you walking toward me. You're about to make me the happiest man alive." Maya smiled and typed back, "See you at the altar." But as she put her phone away, Maya noticed something strange. The message had come from a different phone number than the one she usually used to contact David. When she scrolled through their previous conversations, she realized that David had been texting her from various numbers over the past few months, always with explanations about work phones or technical problems. "Maya, it's time," the wedding coordinator announced, poking her head into the bridal suite. Maya's father appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in his navy suit and beaming with pride. "Ready to walk down the aisle, sweetheart?" Maya took a deep breath and nodded. Whatever questions she had about David would have to wait. This was her wedding day, and she was going to focus on the love they shared rather than the mysteries that surrounded him. The music began, and Maya's bridesmaids started their procession down the aisle. Through the window, Maya could see David waiting at the altar in his wheelchair, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, and even from a distance, she could see the emotion on his face. When the wedding march began to play, Maya linked arms with her father and took her first step toward her new life. The garden looked magical, filled with the warm glow of afternoon sunlight and the smiling faces of everyone she loved. But as they walked slowly down the aisle, Maya's attention was completely focused on David. He sat at the altar next to the minister, his hands folded in his lap, watching her with an expression of pure love and anticipation. Maya had seen that look on his face many times over the past year, but today it seemed different somehow. There was something else in his eyes that she couldn't quite identify. Nervousness, maybe, or perhaps the same excitement she was feeling. As Maya got closer to the altar, she noticed that David seemed to be shifting in his wheelchair more than usual. His hands gripped the armrests, and she could see that he was breathing deeply, as if trying to calm himself. Maya assumed it was just wedding day nerves. After all, this was the biggest day of both their lives. When Maya reached the front of the garden, her father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in David's. "Take care of my daughter," he whispered. "I promise," David replied, his voice thick with emotion. The minister began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the journey that had brought Maya and David to this moment. Maya tried to focus on the beautiful words, but she found herself studying David's face, looking for signs of the man she thought she knew. "David," the minister said, "do you take Maya to be your wife? To love and cherish in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live." David looked directly into Maya's eyes, and for a moment, she saw something that looked like pain cross his features. But then he smiled, and his voice was clear and strong when he said, "I do. Maya, do you take David to be your husband? To love and cherish in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked at the man she loved. Despite all her questions and doubts, she knew that her feelings for David were real. "I do," she said softly. "The rings, please," the minister announced. As David reached for Maya's wedding ring, something extraordinary happened. His movement seemed different, more fluid than usual. Maya watched in confusion as David appeared to shift his weight in the wheelchair. Then, to everyone's complete shock, David slowly began to stand up. Gasps echoed through the garden as David rose from his wheelchair, standing tall and steady on his own 2 feet. Maya's mouth fell open in disbelief. The man she had known for over a year, the man she had fallen in love with while he struggled with paralysis, was standing perfectly normally in front of her. "David?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. The garden fell completely silent except for the sound of Maya's heart pounding in her ears. David stood there for a moment, looking at the shock and confusion on Maya's face, and she could see tears forming in his eyes. "Maya," David said, his voice breaking, "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you the truth about who I really am." Maya felt like the world was spinning around her. The man she was about to marry, the man she thought she knew, had just stood up from a wheelchair he apparently didn't need. Every assumption she had made about their relationship, every moment of care and compassion she had given him, suddenly felt like it might have been based on a lie. "I don't understand," Maya said, her voice trembling. David, what's happening? David looked around the garden at all the confused and shocked faces staring back at him. Maya's family looked bewildered, and even the people on David's side of the venue seemed surprised by what they were witnessing. "My name is David Kim," he said, his voice carrying across the silent garden, "but I'm not the man you think I am. I'm not disabled, and I'm not a millionaire businessman. I'm a doctor. I'm a neurologist, and for the past year I've been living a lie." Maya felt her knees go weak, and she reached out to steady herself against the altar. Everything she thought she knew about the man she loved was crumbling around her, and she had no idea what was real anymore. The silence in the garden was deafening. Maya stared at David, who stood perfectly steady on his own 2 feet, looking nothing like the man she thought she had fallen in love with. Her wedding dress suddenly felt heavy, and the beautiful flowers around them seemed to mock the disaster unfolding at what should have been the happiest moment of her life. "You're a doctor?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "You've been lying to me this entire time?" David's face was filled with pain and regret. He took a step toward Maya, but she instinctively stepped back, creating distance between them. The simple movement seemed to break David's heart even more. "Maya, please let me explain," David said, his voice desperate. "Yes, I'm a neurologist. I work at City General Hospital, and I've been practicing medicine for 6 years. But everything else about my feelings for you, about loving you, that's all real." Maya's mind was racing, trying to process what she was hearing. The wheelchair? The paralysis? The car accident? Was any of it true? David looked down at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "There was no car accident. I was never paralyzed. I came to the rehabilitation center as part of a research study I was conducting." Maya felt sick to her stomach. "A research study? You were studying me?" "Not you specifically," David said quickly. "I was researching caregiver relationships, trying to understand how genuine connections form between patients and medical professionals. I wanted to see if people could love someone who needed care, or if they were motivated by other factors like money or status." Maya's friend Lisa gasped audibly from the audience. "You were experimenting on her?" David finally looked up, his eyes filled with tears. "It started as research, but it became so much more than that. Maya, within the first week of knowing you, I realized that you were nothing like what I expected to find. You cared for me not because you had to, but because that's who you are. You're genuinely kind and compassionate. So you decided to keep lying to me?" Maya's voice was getting stronger, fueled by growing anger. "For over a year, you let me believe you were someone completely different." "I tried to tell you the truth so many times," David said, his voice breaking. "But the longer it went on, the more scared I became of losing you. You fell in love with David the patient, David the businessman. I was terrified that if you knew I was just a doctor conducting research, you would hate me." Maya's father stepped forward from the audience, his face red with anger. "You manipulated my daughter. You made her believe she was caring for someone who needed her help." "I know how this looks," David said, addressing Maya's father but keeping his eyes on Maya. "I know I handled this terribly, but my feelings for Maya are completely real. I love her more than I've ever loved anyone in my life." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup her sister had spent hours perfecting. "How can you say you love me when everything about our relationship was built on lies? The expensive gifts, the fancy restaurants, the promises about taking care of me financially. Where did that money even come from if you're just a doctor?" David took a deep breath. "I do well as a neurologist, and I've been saving money for years. I also inherited some money from my grandparents. I wasn't lying about being able to provide for you, Maya. I just wasn't honest about how I earned it." "What about your family?" Maya asked. "Your parents who live overseas, your business associates?" "More lies?" "My parents live about 2 hours away from here," David admitted. "They're both retired teachers. I told them I was dating someone I met through work, but I never explained the circumstances. The people sitting on my side today are colleagues from the hospital who agreed to come when I told them I was getting married." Maya looked around the garden at all the shocked faces staring back at her. Her dream wedding had become a nightmare, and she was standing in the middle of it in a white dress that now felt like a costume for a play she never auditioned for. "Maya," David said softly, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong. But please believe me when I say that falling in love with you was never part of the plan. You changed everything for me." "Changed everything?" Maya's voice rose. You mean you changed everything for me? You made me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist. You let me plan a future with a fantasy. David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Before you make any decisions, there's something else you need to know. The research study I was conducting, I never published it. I never wrote a single word about you or our relationship. The moment I realized I was falling in love with you, I abandoned the entire project. He held out the envelope to Maya. These are all my notes, all my observations, everything I recorded during the first few weeks at the rehabilitation center. I want you to have them. I want you to see that even in my clinical notes you can tell when my feelings changed from professional interest to something much deeper. Maya stared at the envelope but didn't take it. You think giving me your research notes makes this better? You think that proves something? I think it proves that what we have is real, even if it started in the wrong way, David said. Maya, I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. But I also know that when we talked for hours in your car, when we dreamed about our future together, when we held each other during difficult moments, those feelings were genuine. Maya's mother stood up from her seat in the front row. Maya, honey, maybe we should postpone this conversation. This is a lot to process and you don't have to make any decisions right now. But Maya knew she couldn't postpone this. She couldn't walk away without getting answers to the questions that had been haunting her for weeks. David, the apartment address you gave me, I went there and you don't live there. David looked surprised. You went to my apartment? A woman answered the door. She said no one named David Kim had ever lived there. David closed his eyes and sighed deeply. I gave you my old address from medical school. I was renting a room from that woman during my residency, but I moved out 2 years ago. I live in a small apartment near the hospital now. I was embarrassed because it's nothing special. Certainly not the kind of place someone with a successful technology company would live. More lies, Maya said, shaking her head. Even when you're trying to explain, you're still not being completely honest. You're right, David said simply. I've been lying for so long that I don't even know how to stop. But Maya, I'm trying to be honest now. I'm telling you everything, even though I know it means I'm probably losing you forever. Maya looked around the garden one more time. Her family and friends were watching her with concern and love, waiting to support whatever decision she made. David stood alone near the altar, no longer the confident businessman she thought she knew, but a man who looked broken and desperate. I need time, Maya said finally. I need time to think about everything you've told me, to figure out what's real and what isn't. I can't marry you today. David, I can't marry someone I don't actually know. David nodded, tears flowing freely down his face. I understand. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but Maya, please don't give up on us completely. Please take some time to think about whether the love we shared was real. Because for me, it was the most real thing that's ever happened in my life. Maya slowly reached up and removed her engagement ring, the beautiful diamond that had once represented her dreams of the future. She placed it gently on the altar between them. I loved you, David, she said softly. I loved who I thought you were, but I need to figure out if I can love who you really are. With that, Maya gathered up her wedding dress and walked back down the aisle, leaving David standing alone at the altar. As she reached the back of the garden, she turned around one last time to look at the man who had changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand.